very moving. So, thank you. My name is Purcell. I appreciate the ability to come here and kind of talk about something I find very interesting, the future of education and the intersection of technology as we move to this digital age. And as we think about this, I actually want to begin with an activity. I want you to kind of brainstorm what you think the future classroom will look like in 20, 25 years. What that future student, future teacher, what will it look like in 25 years? You all probably have different ideas, so I'll throw one out here. Will it look like this? Where it's really, at birth, you kind of insert the chip into the head, begin that instructional modeling, and kind of push the child onto learning. Funny enough, this is actually, this is debated in many education circles today in terms of like what is that future model going to look like, and what is the best practice. And so, what I find so interesting about this topic is that one is it's obviously very relevant, it's very topical, it's very current, it's also very controversial. And it's something that we're all involved in. We're all involved with education, whether we've gone through our own experiences, we have our own children, we have friends, teachers. And it's something that is moving very quickly in this new technology age. So what I'm hoping to do tonight is actually go through and talk about some of these forces that are driving technology into the classrooms, both from a policy and more of a cultural point of view. Look at some of these tools and services that we're actually currently using within the schools today. And then start looking further out. Look out, 20, 25 years. What will the classroom look like? What will the future student look like? How will they learn? Will it be different? And then go back to those questions of, so what? What do we do as we move forward as a society? What are the things that we want to consider, as a collective group? And so before we begin, I'll give a quick background on myself, is that I've been in education for over 10 years. I started out in the New York City public schools where I implemented new technology solutions around assessment. And then currently I work for a major U.S. education publisher developing content for the K-12 marketplace. So I've seen kind of this fusion of technology and education from two different lenses, both from the district and state perspective, and also now from a publisher perspective. So let's begin. The current landscape. I'm not getting into too much detail, but it's important to understand why technology is actually coming at us so quickly from a school perspective. You look at it first, in the 1990s, you had the standards-based reform movement. Then you moved into the 2000s with the Bush administration and the No Child Left Behind. We're all probably very familiar with those policies, for good or for bad. They brought more data, more technology into the schools. And currently we have the Common Core State Standards. This will be a major initiative rolled out in school year 2014-2015, which is quite fascinating. For good or for bad, what it's doing is actually highlighting technology in the schools in a great way. It's a de facto national standards where over 44 states have opted into this, and it's changing the way students are supposed to learn. It's looking more of preparing the student for the 21st century, someone who not only ready for college but for a career, and pulling in different types of ways you assess a student, such as bringing in digital media and bringing in more collaboration, more rigor around the standards. So, for an example, you would take let's take a juice box example. In previous standards, they would ask the student to, in a typical fashion, like, give me the mathematical computation of that juice box, give me the square footage or the radius, and kind of more rote memorization, more strict application. But the Common Core State Standards, the intent is that they want the students to think beyond that. So they'll have to do that mathematical computation, but then also apply it, where the question might be, take that juice box and find a way to market it in a new global country and provide a digital marketing campaign using video, using new tools that we actually use in society. So really kind of going beyond what the students been asked for. But beyond the merits of Common Core, because you've probably all heard about it in the radio and the news, and it's quite the topical discussion, is that the Common Core standards will be assessed via technology, new computer adaptive technology. And so what that's doing is that's providing a whole new landscape on the educational system. Now schools have to provide an infrastructure to support computer adaptive assessment, and now they want to bring in more tools to actually help prepare students and teachers for these new standards. And a lot of that is around digital curriculum, digital assessment. The second point here is just the proliferation of technology in schools. We've seen that this is more of a cultural society perspective, is that we live with more laptops, more smartphones, more tablets. It's just part of where we're moving in this world. And so that alone has had schools experiment with new types of learning already, one-to-one laptops, computer. It's been going on for many years and trying different models around this. Some of it's more budgetary based, and just schools are experimenting more with technology. So you hear these two different forces. You've got both the policy perspective and you also got the society perspective of pushing technology in schools. And you might just wonder, like, what does that actually look like in the classroom today? So you have these tools that I talked about. You've got the consumer devices moving into schools. You also have things like interactive whiteboards, which are replacing the typical whiteboard, where now you can stream live content. Students can go up and actually have discussion that can be recorded, it can be sent. It's just adding a layer of technology. You also, for the younger learners, which is actually more difficult to implement technology, you have, let's say, the group-based learning with a table where students actually would problem solve and they'd actually move around puzzles. You can now actually add on an interactive map and talk about maybe the school trip that you're taking down the street to the zoo, and put an interactive school sign and bus and everything, and actually make that engaging, more relevant for that student. And so beyond actually these tools, what I find, and a lot of people argue this, that if technology is used properly, the value it's giving to schools, and we're talking teachers, students, and even beyond that to administrators and parents, is invaluable. It's really giving data to help drive instruction. And when you break that down, it's helping personalize the experience of the actual learner. It's able, if teachers use it correctly, they're able to see progress measures of students in a quick, real-time fashion. They're able to actually take data and actually help group their instruction to see which students are excelling, which students actually need more support, which students are actually moving along into that capacity. It's amazing when they're using these tools properly what we can get. I'll give some examples here. Adaptive assessment. This is something you're seeing is computer adaptive diagnostics, where let's say a student moves from Michigan here to California. They sit in a 5th grade class. You can do a very quick diagnostic and see, I want to see what that kid is actually reading and performing math. This diagnostic would say, the student who's in a 5th grade class actually is performing math at 7th grade level, but reading is at a 4th grade level. So from that point of view, this teacher already has that data. They can actually help personalize that experience for the student, give them more support, and put them on the way instead of having to wait for an end-of-year assessment, which sometimes is too late for students. At the same time, this is a very basic one, is to give new channels to educational resources. And you have to remember, schoolhouses before, what was in the schoolhouse or what was in the libraries is the materials you have. Now with the internet and multiple publishers, you have a variety of different content that you can pull in, so that is just alone. And now you see with new kind of technology, you're able to stream information that you never could before, so that this experience is much more engaging. Communities of practice. This is something I feel like is overlooked a lot. It's something important to talk about, more from the teacher's perspective. Teachers have such an amazing job, and sometimes such a challenging job in terms of teaching students. They teach students who all have different learning needs. And so if we take an example of a 1st grader, a teacher might be working with a 1st grade student who maybe is an English language learner, is having some trouble decoding or with phonemic awareness, and understanding how to read. And the teachers tried 15 different ways. They tried their tried and true methods, and they're just not getting it. And they really want to collaborate beyond what they tried. In typical settings, they would go to their school and talk to their staff, but now with the ability that teachers can talk on a social media platform with other teachers, they can go to different portals, different blogs, different wikis, and actually you find different ways of actually helping this first grader read. They can share lesson plans, and you're finding that this is growing. They can not just go to the school, they can go across districts, across the state, and globally. And it's something that you're starting to see traction. Teachers are getting much more excited about this. And then the last example I feel like gets real true value from these technology tools, if used properly, is around the use of almost big data in a way. And when we say big data in the school setting, it's very taboo and also controversial, because you think about social media, you think about big corporations and how they're actually using your data. But used responsibly, you can actually run very sophisticated analysis of correlations of how students move from cohorts through a K-12 setting all the way to college, and see how they succeeded to the standards set in high school to how they actually performed in college. And maybe that cohort needed more remedial help than cohorts in different states, in different subgroups. It's amazing what you're able to actually do in a responsible setting. I also think for parents, the technology is giving an invaluable amount of information, not just into performance and assessment scores, which they're always interested in, but tools like Great Schools, which many of you might have used here. It's an organization in Oakland, but it allows you to actually see ratings of schools that not only pulls in assessment data, but school safety data, parental feedback into an application where parents can make more informed decisions of where their child should be going for learning. So you've heard all this, and you're like, great, well there's all this information, there's all this technology that's going on in schools, and okay, so where are we moving towards? Like, how is this actually impacting that instructional model? How's it actually changing? So when we look out 25 years, this is where I think the great debate goes on in terms of education, in terms of how technology is impacting that teaching and learning model. I mean, we're all familiar with this traditional classroom setting. It's very practical. We're all probably been through it in one stage or another. It's very successful in a lot of settings, and it will continue to be used going forward in a lot of settings. The traditional one teacher to many students. But as you look forward to the future, what will that future classroom look like? Will it look like this classroom, the same typical classroom setting with just maybe laptops pulled in front of students? Or are we looking at something that's even more insular, more pod-like, where students are actually learning by themselves in front of a terminal, more student-generated learning, something more radical like the School of One, which we did in New York City, where it was a middle school schools where students would go in and actually the student-generated curriculum. They led their own way, and the role of the teacher was more in the background. So we see the trends go more towards that way as technology comes to the classroom. Or is it a combination? Is it a combination of taking the great merits of a traditional classroom setting where you actually have many students in collaboration and learning from others, and a teacher facilitating and being dynamic and pushing that curriculum onto the students and helping them learn. And also including these new technology advances around mobile devices and having the ability to stream content at home via laptops and smartphones and other types of devices. And also the fact that we have internet, which actually can pull in resources that we were never able to before. If you ask me, and what we're seeing is, it's more of this combination. And what the industry's calling it today is blended learning. You probably heard this blended learning, you're like, okay, well, what exactly is blended learning? But it really does take those concepts of a traditional classroom setting, mobile, the fact that we actually can stream content in multiple places, not just when we're actually sitting down. And then online, the fact that we're able to get resources from outside. And you're seeing it take place in different forms, and it's been going on for many years. Many institutions, especially in the higher grades in higher institutions, higher ed, have actually been experimenting with this in quite some fashion. But we're seeing schools start to really grasp this. And so the next question is like, well, let's actually look at a model and talk about what that is. And so I think a prime example of this blended learning is this flipped classroom. The flipped classroom, you might ask, what is that? Is that where the student becomes a teacher, and the teacher becomes a student? Yes and no, but that's actually not the thing. But you look at that traditional classroom setting where the teacher instructs, the student's taking the notes, the student follows the guided instruction, teacher gives assessment, student has homework. We're all familiar with that, as we explained. The flipped classroom is essentially, literally flipping that on its head, where the teacher's instructing the lesson at home. So all that work that would go into a traditional lecture where the teacher's speaking to many students is actually done at home, all the preparations at home. So then the essential homework is then in the class. So the class, students come in, they come prepared, they go into deeper understanding, more of a collaboration with their others, and you can check actual instruction. And then you go back and students actually go back and have their own guided instruction based on the support they need. And so this was developed, if you look at the history, this has been experimented on many, many years ago, but it's been more formalized in kind of education circle by a couple high school chemistry teachers in Colorado, Jonathan Bergman and Aaron Sams. And they just asked, like, wow, this new technology is coming, and it's changing the way I can teach. My instructional model is being challenged. It needs to change with the times. And so they would say, like, the fact that they can actually record their videos and watch them on YouTube, or utilize videos via Khan Academy and have students do that preparation beforehand is invaluable. And this is a classic model of how we're seeing technology really impact and really change, how the instructional model is changing that typical classroom setting, whereas it's split classroom. So, as you see here, this is a better example to show. At the top, you have what would be going on in classroom, and the bottom out of class. And so, sorry it's not as in focus, but if we went through an example, let's say high school biology. As we know, high school biology has a lot of engaging topics, a lot of great lab work that we remember. There's also a great amount of lecture that needs to be done in terms of actually understanding the baseline before you go into this. So if we took the human heart, the circulation system for that example, there's a lot of work you can do beforehand at home in this setting where students can pull in via their computer these 3D models of the heart, look at the chambers of the heart, understand the veins and arteries and different blood types, and really get that baseline knowledge so when they come into class, the teacher's already got a whole different level of where they're understanding. They do quick polling and see, wow, that student really understood my material, or my material didn't go far enough. And then they could break them up into groups so they can actually really dig into that topic in a much deeper way. And then after, where you actually see, well, maybe 20% of the students need more support, 20% more of students actually need advanced learning, whatever it is, they can go back and continue their learning. And what's important to understand is that the goals of the whole, a typical classroom setting and a flipped classroom setting is the same. It's really to engage the learner in order to actually understand the material and apply it in a robustful, creative way, however the teacher wants. But it's really flipping how you're doing that. You're taking that traditional lecture and saying, at home, we're going to do the lecture, and in class, we're going to do the homework. And if you applied it to the session today, many of you obviously don't know me, and you come in here, if you're able to kind of watch this lecture beforehand and kind of you'd be able to say, I don't know what he was talking about in terms of some of the Common Core state standards, or I want more explanation about what he was talking about in the flipped classroom. You could come in here and our level of engagement would be much different. We could break up into groups. We could actually have to go off and work together. And just that experience is different. That instructional model has changed, and that really is via technology, because you can listen to the car via a podcast, or actually sit at home, and watch it on your YouTube laptop before. And so you're finding these new ways that are actually changing the way kids are learning. Okay, so you're listening to me, you're hearing all about this new technology. It all sounds like it's great. It all sounds like kids are learning at a new rate. To the contrary, we always know there's a lot of challenges around our U.S. Education system. Even globally, there's challenges. And with technology, it's the same thing. And any new technology that comes out, there's always cautions to think about. Whether it was the TV when it came out in the 40s, there was always cautions about, well, it's going to wreck the human brain, and they're going to be learning differently. I think it's the same thing to think about how technology is coming into the classroom, is that there is kind of live case studies of how this is actually playing out, and actually how kids learn via technology. And so some cautions, there's a list of these, but some that I want to highlight is that technology should not be used in isolation. There's a lot of great research in the education world about the human brain actually learns well with collaboration and learns well with others. And I think there's real risk when you go very radical with technology is the sole primary delivery mechanism for students. I think the second one is one that you probably hear of the most, the social emotional aspect of learning. You might be reading an article about this school district has implemented this new one-to-one, all iPads for all students, and then you might hear, the flip is that, well, I'm very scared that my students are going to have a delay in their social development, and they won't actually be able to even say hello to their neighbors down the street because we're just focused on technology. And this one is the social emotional aspect is something that we'll be discussing, continue to be discussing. It is something that's very real that we want to talk about as we begin to integrate new technology into the schools. The last one, technology-enabled assessment. And this kind of goes back to the Common Core. As I talked about, the Common Core, those standards will be assessed via technology, computer-adapted technology. And someone who's been in assessment for many years is that whenever you go for something that is completely computer-based for these assessment models, is that you actually lose some of that comprehensive picture of a student. You lose that holistic viewpoint of it. So it's always important to consider the facts that whenever we go to something technology-enabled for assessing young children, make sure that complete picture is there. So I've gone through, I've kind of talked about a couple different things here. I've talked about why we're seeing more technology in schools. I've talked about some future models. I've talked about something that we're seeing from a blended learning perspective where I think is going to gain more traction in the school, the flipped classroom. The question is, what next? What can we do as we continue to think about this collision of education and technology? And I think the important thing is, when I leave with the slide, is that this image here is of a teacher. And the teacher is both an entertainer and also an instructor. They have some of the most challenging tasks to deal with, in my opinion. They're the true heroes in terms of actually being able to teach the students and move students on. So in this circle that I've created here, is that kind of just shown some things they're responsible for. I mean, teachers are responsible for the well-being of the students in the classroom, and they're also responsible for teaching that curriculum to the students. They're also responsible for progressing that student, graduating that student into society as functional, responsible citizens. And at the same time, you've got a bunch of stakeholders who are always on teachers, whether it's parents or administrators coming in, making sure they're hitting certain standards and performing to certain obligations. And then, in this circle here, is that you're seeing this infusion of technology coming in. And teachers have been trained for many years about their own pedagogical understanding about how to teach and how to learn, and how students learn. And they have very good practices that have been proven over time. And now you're adding this whole new element, and then some of them are asked to move very quickly in terms of how students should learn this, how they should include technology into schools. And it's very difficult, because some schools' philosophy is, let's not even bring in technology, and some schools' philosophy is, we're going to go actually from zero technology to 100%. And I think if you start to lose focus of the teacher's perspective, and this is what I say for the next 5 to 7 years, where I think is so critical as we focus society on this new age of technology, is that understand the teaching and instructional model that a teacher has to go through. Understand, what is it that they need from a professional development point of view about how to actually use these tools and services in the classroom. Understand what are the new case studies that are going on about how children learn at the younger grades with new types of gamification or new types of models around technology. And understand how this technology can assist teachers. What do they need? What do they need to make that engagement with the child or the student that much more richer? And if you don't, you'll find that a lot of this technology will just sit in corners and just gather dust or sit in boxes that are never opened. And I think that is the critical thing, is that we need to continue to support how to dialogue with teachers and administrators about how we train, whether it's going back and looking at institutions that train teachers, education, universities and graduate schools, and continue to have that open dialogue. Because what we might find out that teachers actually might want to actually use this as they instruct their students. They find that this is actually a tool that helps facilitate and best teaches their children. So I'll leave you with that. I thank you for your time, and enjoy the evening.